It goes to bloody 11.
Yep, that's right. They go to 11. Welcome to the podcast. And this is our first podcast, so take it easy on us. But no, what we've decided to do is a lot of people, when they start doing lists, they do 10. And I heard that 11 was one better, so what a better place to start out with the top 11 albums of the 90s. It's something that's both near and dear to my heart, and I'm Matt.
I am Pokey. It's near and dear to mine, and Spinal Tap went to 11, and Spinal Tap's awesome.
Well, yeah, you're right.
So there you go.
And if you haven't seen Spinal Tap, go get it, Blu-ray, DVD, whatever you need to do. Just watch that movie and
VHS.
Who has VHS anymore? Nobody has VHS. But anyway, getting back on track. So the top 11 albums of the 90s. So got a couple rules that we went on. First and foremost, no band on this list twice. I mean, I could probably do a couple bands. So the album had to have come out between January 1st, 1990 and December 31st, 1999. So
if you're before or after that, you suck. And don't belong on this list.
Well, they don't suck because there's a ton of albums. As I was going through this, I thought maybe they came out in the 90s. No, actually, they came out in 2000. So the 2000s are still okay by my book.
No, the albums were definitely great because there were albums I had on my list that surprisingly were from the 80s.
Wow. And going into this as well, it has to be a rock album. So it cannot be anything, it can't be pop or anything like that. And anything that falls within any sort of rock genre is fair game. So I could have put a ton of things on here for one-hit wonders of pop stuff because, man, I love me some Mambo Number 5 and I have no idea why.
Hey, I get knocked out and then I get back again. Never ever going to keep me down.
All right, then. So Pokey is the co-host here. So I'm controlling everything. So I'm going to let him go first with number 11.
Number 11 for me was... Well, first off, let me go. There are some albums on here that just needed to be on here, and then there are ones that made the list that could have either gone either way. Number 11 is one of those albums. For number 11, I have Smash by The Offspring.
See, I put the same thing. And the reason why I put the same thing is because that was honestly the first time people saw an indie band actually make it and make it big, because Smash, I don't know if you know this, but it's the number one top-selling indie album of all time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a killer album. I mean, just listening to Bad Habit when you're like 9 or 10, just, going through music for the first time and then hearing the lyrics in that song.
Oh, forget about it.
You stupid, dumb shit, goddamn motherfucker.
Yeah, and, it went 7 times platinum for an indie album.
Yeah, right?
But to me, it makes number 11 because, like I said, great album, like you pointed out. I mean, the lyric, great. But I feel without Green Day, it wouldn't have had the same impact.
You know what? I don't agree with that. I mean, the album was strong on its own, and it produced a lot of hits for the guys. So I really don't see how that album really would have made it on its own.
Dookie came out 2 months prior.
Doesn't matter though. I mean, when you were listening to them, Green Day had a very different sound than The Offspring. I mean, Green Day, if you want to say it, they sold out on Dookie to become popular. The Offspring at that point, they were still The Offspring, and they just did the album the way The Offspring always did an album. So, I mean, like I said, I think it was, for the time, it was a really good album. It definitely didn't make a big splash. I mean, I think it made enough of an impact to bring punk music to the forefront.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I don't think that in comparison to anything else that I have on my list, that it holds a candle to them. So, all right, that's 11. What do you have for number 10?
Number 10, I have the self-titled Sublime.
Wow. Okay, so you have that there. Number 10, I actually have Far Beyond Driven from Pantera.
I didn't even put Pantera on my list. I feel so, oh God, I feel so dirty. How could I forget that? I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Still, I stick with Sublime as number 10.
Okay. Well, why do you put Sublime at 10?
Again, a lot of great stuff on there. I mean, there's a great mix of hits but there's also the same amount of cult hits, as you'd say. Everybody's seen those cult classic movies. This album has its cult classic hits. But, you had a lot of stuff that also had meaning to it. There was impact to it. I mean, one of my favorite songs on there, and it's, again, a cult hit. April 29th, 1992.
Yeah, that was one of the big ones that came off of that album.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a single.
Yeah. No, but actually, around here, and we should say that we're in New Jersey, around here it wasn't a hit single because New Jersey, really, let's put it this way, has a shit presence when it comes to rock music. I mean, there's only like 1 or 2 rock stations around here, and none of them really stray off the beaten path or at least try anything controversial, in my opinion. But I digress.
I mean, and the other thing, too, is that here in New Jersey, that song just didn't have the same meaning.
Yeah, like in California, yeah. I mean, in California, that was what it was all about.
California, Chicago, Miami. I mean, any place with large urban population. I mean, come on, man. That sprung NWA. Like, that whole year was just huge for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a shame it didn't become a hit.
Well, if anybody picked up the album, I mean, the whole album is essentially one hit. You really have to listen to it and understand where they're coming from, and then especially the impact that it had at the time with Bradley, dying 2 months before the album came out, so he never saw the success of it.
Nope.
But yeah, I mean, the impact of that, actually made me bump it up a little bit higher because Sublime, they became Sublime with that album. You heard other songs from Sublime before that, but that's where everybody was like, whoa, this is awesome band. Let me get their back catalog now.
Yeah. I mean, it also brought the genre of ska to the foreground too. I mean, again, you had your punk inspiration, you had your reggae inspiration, you had ska in there. I mean, it was something big like that, but to me, there's just other albums that rank higher.
Oh, absolutely. So going to my number 10, Far Beyond Driven. Now, let's put it this way. I'm not the biggest fan of Far Beyond Driven. I like, actually, Cowboys from Hell a lot better. And, I mean, that's where everybody saw Pantera pretty much for the first time being Pantera. I mean, they had their glam rock days, which they really care not to talk about anymore. But with Far Beyond Driven, this was actually their number one. They hit number one on the charts with Far Beyond Driven. And when I'm Broken hit, I mean, that was it. I mean, there were so many great songs on the earlier albums, but this was Pantera truly overcoming everything at the time. And I know what Metallica did with the Black Album, that kind of brought metal to a lot of people. But with this one, I mean, metal still was kind of in the background. So now, with Pantera coming up and then hitting number one with this, I feel that this was a great choice for, number 10. Once again, metal didn't take over. It didn't take over like hair metal did back in the 80s. I just think it was, a great album for the time and for, what it actually did.
That makes sense. I mean, like I said, I kind of feel a little dirty that I just don't have Pantera on my list. But, hey, you know what? That's why there's two of us, and that's why I'm the character.
There you go. So, what do you got at number 9? I'll start off with mine because my number 9...
I've been going first here all the time, man.
Well, my number 9 is Sublime. Sublime,
Okay.
the self-titled.
Okay.
So we just talked about that. What do you got at 9?
I have the Downward Spiral.
Oh, God.
Listen, just because you don't like Nine Inch Nails...
It's not that I don't like 9 Inch Nails. I just don't think that was in the top the top albums. We're talking like the ones that made a big impact. Please tell me how you fit 9 Inch Nails into this.
Easy. I mean, you had grunge music. Grunge music was something that was all about, okay, let's be real here. It was depressing. It was all about self-hatred, all that crap. I mean, there wasn't anything positive about grunge music
Smashing
at all.
guitars. That's positive.
Like I said, no, it's not positive because you could have a killer guitar and you're smashing thing. Anyway, neither here nor there. That's another debate. But to me, this was like the album that defined self-hatred, and it was I'm not gonna lie, it was a depressing album. It was eerily haunting. I mean, the album was recorded in the house where the Tate murders happened. I mean, to me, that brings its own eeriness to it. But the biggest song. I mean, Closer. Everybody has this song misconceived, thinking it's all about, sex, and it's really not. I mean, it's, believe it or not, it's more so Trent Reznor, talking about his self in that, and him being, it's looking at sex from his standpoint, from being by yourself. And if you take away the words from that, you remove all words and just stick with the instrumental, there has never been a song out there, and there never will be a song out there that instrumentally lays out sex. From beginning to climax to orgasm to the innocence afterwards.
How long did it take you to come up with that?
I've had that theory since 2004, and you know it.
All right, like I said, I'm not the hugest Nine Inch Nails fan, but correct me if I'm wrong, was this the album that they covered Johnny Cash's Hurt on?
Actually, Johnny Cash covered Hurt.
Yes. Excuse me.
Yes, we had Hurt, Closer, March of the Pigs, Piggy. I mean, those were the big songs off.
He likes animals. Does he have something for pigs?
No, but it's more so, again, you got to take all these lyrics. You can't just sit there and say that pigs means that I want to go out and fuck a pig. I'm not a pig fucker.
I want to fuck you like an animal. Then he's got songs about March of the Pigs, and then he's got another song called Piggy.
Then you have Hurt.
But wait, did March of the Pigs come before Closer, and then did Piggy come after that?
You have the computer there. Look at the track listing.
Because that'd be really funny if that was laid out that way.
But in all seriousness, I mean, if you think about it, the line "I want to fuck you like an animal" doesn't mean that I'm sitting here acting as somebody else. This is that song where he's acting that upon himself.
All right. Well, we're gonna jump on to number 8. What do you got for your number 8?
Why don't you? You know what? Only because you know.
All right, I'll give you my number 8. All right. So on my number 8, I put Bush's 16 Stone.
It's interesting. I didn't even have Bush make my list. I had. Well, you tell me why.
All right. So I like Bush at number 8 here because not only at the time did you have what was the American grunge, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, the whole Seattle sound and that whole scene going on, but then Britain turns around, and this was Britain's first big hit of grunge music. And Bush came out, and they sounded, honestly, just as good as Nirvana did at the time, in my opinion. In some cases, I think they were a little bit better. They were a little bit more refined than Nirvana. And, they just came out with this killer sound, and you got Machine Head, Glycerin, Everything Zen on one album.
Some of my favorite songs.
Yeah, and it just really exploded, and Bush became huge because they followed that grunge formula, but did it with more definition, let's say. And I think it made it more accessible to a lot of people. So they helped forward the grunge movement. Did they have the impact that Nirvana did? No, not even close. But I think for what they did it really, really well. And 16 Stone was really the biggest album to hit for those guys. Because if you think of anything they did after that, they did Razor Blade Suitcase, which was kind of like... Yeah, it was meh. And they didn't really follow the same formula. And then they did... what was the green one?
Chemicals Between Us?
Well, that's the song on it. It's just it wasn't as popular.
No.
What the hell was the name of that album?
There it is.
The Science of Things. I knew it had the word science in it. So, The Science of Things, that was more of like a concept album. And did you know that they released one more after that?
No, not at all.
It's called The Golden State, and it's the worst thing that I've ever heard.
Even worse than Yoko Ono?
I think she had some talent on that and on what she's done. That was just garbage in a band breaking up. That's what that was. If you heard Guns N' Roses on the Spaghetti Incident, it sounds the same thing on Golden State. It's terrible. But
something I've never heard, and
you don't want to.
I mean, I've heard the Spaghetti Incident, but that's a different topic that we're going to cover later.
All right, so what do you got at number 8?
Number 8, I have Follow the Leader.
Ooh. Okay, I knew you were going to put this somewhere in here.
Of course.
Okay.
Why not? Because this, I mean, we talked about Pantera making an impact of, with metal. Like a band besides Metallica or Megadeth made an impact on metal. And that was Pantera. Well, Korn came out with this, and this was literally the big staple for this new genre called nu metal. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is their junior album. This is their third album. I mean, Korn's self-titled album was great, but not big enough to land on this list. Life is Peachy, great album as well, but again, didn't have the same impact. Follow the Leader, that made nu metal popular. Like, it took off, and it ushered in Limp Bizkit, Kid Rock, Incubus, Orgy. So many bands came out that followed that wave all because of that album. It even sparked its own festival, the Family Values Tour, which after Korn dropped off just kind of fizzled out into nothing. But still, there was just such a large, what came after it.
I'll talk more about that in a little bit as we get up a little higher. But no, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, what's most odd about the whole thing is I remember getting the album back in, what was it, 1998 or 97?
97 or 98.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Family Values Tour started in 98, and I think it was like 3 months prior. It was like summer of 98, June or July of 98 that came out.
So somewhere in that vicinity. But what I really found interesting, and they try to do the whole album thing, like the whole deep album from the like the 70s, because the first 13 tracks or the first 12 tracks were completely blank.
Yeah, silent. It was great.
Yeah. And
best 12 tracks my parents heard when I was growing up.
Yeah. Do you remember why they did that? I know that there was some reason.
I never did, but I'm sure some nerd out there on Wikipedia knows.
Yeah, but they did it for a specific reason. And then when that 13th track hit, when It's On came on.
It was on.
Yeah, the entire album from front to back, I mean, was really good. And I like the way that they did Children of the Corn with like Ice Cube, and then they did All in the Family with Limp Bizkit when they were coming up.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, Children of the Corn with Ice Cube. Again, I mentioned all this stuff with nu metal and the bands that came out along with or after. But, that song, Children of the Corn, that took Ice Cube, whose career was kind of on a downhill since the NWA broke up there and he started to do movies.
He had some good movies. Come on. Well, his career wasn't on a downward slide.
His music career was on a downward slide.
Let's say that.
Everybody can make family movies, and family movies are going to take off.
Friday wasn't a family movie. It's Friday, you ain't got no job, and you ain't got shit to do.
It depends on what neighborhood you live in. Anyway, again, before you all hang me. No, but all of a sudden, people who never knew what NWA was, now knew what NWA is. Sure, we all knew Snoop Dogg. Where did Snoop Dogg come from? We all knew Dr. Dre. We associate Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. We never threw Ice Cube into that mix. I mean, everybody's heard stories of Eazy-E. Who the hell is Eazy-E? Well, there you go. I mean, and when they did the Family Values Tour and Ice Cube was with them, he practically did 5 or 6 songs on his set that were strict NWA. And I was somebody who hated rap. I couldn't stand hip-hop or rap. But when I heard the NWA songs, right there, brother.
Oh, God. Don't ever do that again. All right. So we're on to number 7.
Number 7. Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I was considering putting the Chili Peppers... Don't look at my list. I was considering putting the Chili Peppers on my list. But then I went back and I had to think about it. When Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out, yes, the Chili Peppers did skyrocket because of everything that happened. They're very inconsistent when you look at the albums. Mother's Milk was before that, and they tried to do...
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was. Mother's Milk was before that.
Yeah.
Blood Sugar Sex Magic, One Hot Minute. So you have 2 albums, and then you have this one that has 3 hits on it. Then they can't keep a steady guitar player.
Well, let's dissect here. So you're bringing up Mother's Milk and you're bringing up One Hot Minute afterwards. You have to realize Mother's Milk was with guitar player Hillel Slovak, who died, of a drug overdose. And a lot of the inspiration behind Blood Sugar Sex Magic came from not only his death, but also Anthony Kiedis and Flea kicking drugs. And then after Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out, John Frusciante left the band.
Right.
So it wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault that they had the revolving door guitarist, beforehand. I mean, the guy overdosed, the guy died. Unfortunately, rest in peace. There's nothing they could do about that.
Right, that I understand.
But then you record this masterpiece of an album from front to back. I mean, again, produced by Rick Rubin, who everybody knows is a creative genius. But again, that's not what makes this album that. But, John Frusciante leaves the band, and then you follow up One Hot Minute with Jane's Addiction guitarist, Dave Navarro, who brought his own spin onto that album. You can't fault one album for a revolving door guitarist.
But if you listen to the content of the albums, I mean, Mother's Milk has got Higher Ground, which is the only hit to come off of it, and it's a Stevie Wonder song.
Yeah.
Right. So that album, in my mind, is just, nah.
But you got to realize, that album was what the Chili Peppers were. They were a funk band, and that is a song by Stevie Wonder. And that was produced by Stevie Wonder too. That track. I think the album might have been too.
And then you do One Hot Minute, which has Aeroplane, which is another cover song, and it's the only hit on the album. So
No, there was My Friends.
That wasn't.
That
huge.
was a hit. That was the big. That was supposed to be the single from that album.
But no, getting back to Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Yeah, to me, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, it is a good album. Maybe I'd put it at 12, maybe 15, but definitely not top 11.
And, again, I mean, we just debated as to why you don't have it on your list, but to me, this solidified the Red Hot Chili Peppers as a band to be taken seriously. I mean, like you said, Mother's Milk wasn't the best album. I mean, if you ask me, it was a group of guys who never had any experience in music but were just musically talented.
And what's funny is up to that point, they put out 2 or 3 albums.
Yeah, I mean, they were immature. There was no maturity in that recording at all. This was the first album they did where they are a mature band. They grew up. It stuck to their funk roots. It also had its set of ballads. I mean, the most famous one being Under the Bridge, which, if it wasn't for Rick Rubin, would have been left on the floor in the Houdini mansion. It would have never made the album if it wasn't for him. And yes, that is a reference because it was recorded in the Houdini mansion. And as a matter of fact, interesting fact, the band members all stayed there except for Chad Smith, who was too creeped out by the fact that it was haunted.
Can't blame him.
Everybody else stayed there. He showed up on a motorcycle every day.
Hey, that's all right. If you're afraid of ghosts, you're afraid of ghosts.
Well, he thought that they were negative. Everybody else in the band thought they were positive. And, hey, it was a positive thing because it made my list.
All right. Well, this is going to be one that I know that's going to have a lot of, why is this on here? Or, a big question mark to anybody who listens to this. Number 7, Santana's Supernatural.
Nope.
Nope what?
Nope. I'll tell you why. This goes back to the rules. The rules were, has to be a rock. Doesn't become other genres.
No. We just said it has to be a rock album, and it has lots of rock tracks on it. Santana is the ultimate classic guitarist. And any track that is on this album has great guitar work on it, whether it's his or others. Go on.
See, but here's the thing. And I anticipated this because we didn't make these lists together. I anticipated this. I mean, you have to realize the only thing that makes this album a rock album is the fact that it's Carlos Santana and it's Carlos Santana playing guitars all rock style. All the tracks on there were all crossing other genres.
Okay. So, just a couple tracks to name a few. Smooth. Obviously the one that he did with
Rob Thomas.
Right. The number 1 single. brought him back. Now, the thing that most people don't realize is Santana and his band weren't together and didn't do anything for 8 to 10 years before this album came out. So not only are you reintroducing new people to Santana and his guitar work that he did to become so famous back in the 60s and 70s, now you're doing it with popular musicians. So great track and smooth.
I'm not doubting that.
Right,
I'm not denying.
Great Latin percussion. Also, on here, he does work with Everlast. Now, it's not hip-hop Everlast. It's not to the extent that, like What It's Like and, songs like that. It's a really great acoustic track with a little bit of hip-hop flavoring in it, but it's still a great rock. It's a great rock song.
Well, let's just admit, nu metal had its hip-hop influence, but it was still,
nothing wrong with that. And I let you have that on your list, okay? But
I'm not saying that this can't be, but then you get other songs off of there. Like, to me, Maria Maria is not a rock song. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a phenomenal song. I will not knock that in any way, and I'm not going to knock this album. Will I say this is a great pop album? Most definitely. Would I classify it as a rock album of the 90s? Not really.
I completely disagree. Because he has all of his Latin stuff that he did back in the 70s on here. He's also got work that he does with Clapton on here. Not many people know that, because not many people would go that deep into the album. To me, this introduces not only Santana back to the public, but it also takes Santana to a whole nother level, because he did an album at that time that nobody else has done. Let me grab my band, and then let me just grab random singers and random people to come in and work on an album. And Santana has built his career for the last, when this come out, in 99. So he's built his career over the last 15 or so years on this concept, and it's great.
It is a great concept, and again, I'm not faulting this as an album, because like you said, it is a great album, and if you go deep, it is a great work of art. But again, to me, it's just not something rock. But you do bring forth good points that you have his band, you have the Latin influence there, and at the same time, you also have artists like Rob Thomas, who pop, rock, whatever you want to call him, and you have Eric Clapton there, who's definitely rock. I mean, I don't know. You're making an argument. I can go with your argument, but to me, I anticipated this, and I still stick with what I say.
Okay. All right.
This is why there's two of us. We have differing opinions.
So now we're getting halfway up the list here.
Yep.
Number 6.
Go ahead.
Oasis. What's the Story? Morning Glory.
Okay.
To me, this is your ultimate coming up and the second wave of what would have been, and I say it this way, what would have been the second British invasion. You had a band that could have been as big as the Beatles because they sounded like the Beatles. They were becoming as influential as the Beatles at that point in time because they were huge in England. And then they came over here and released this album, and it becomes huge. When you start claiming that you're the Beatles, or you're going to be bigger than the Beatles, and saying it instead of proving it, it was all downhill from there. Granted, they had some other hits here and there, but it was just a big downward spiral after that.
See, and I'm gonna disagree with you. I'm not gonna disagree with you with it being on the list. I think it does belong on the list. Do I have it on my list? No. Very influential. And like you said, they could have been the next Beatles. It wasn't them who made that statement, though. I mean, that's the concept that everybody gets wrong. They didn't make that. It was the record industry who sat there and said, these guys are the next Beatles. And you know what? Honestly, even with the record industry saying that, they could have been the next Beatles. I'll stick with it. But Oasis killed it themselves by the two brothers fighting and not being able to keep it together. I'm sorry, when one of you is hanging off the balcony at the MTV Video Music Awards, that's going to kill any momentum forward. You might as well just say you're bigger than Jesus.
I mean, but here's the thing, though. They didn't do anything to discredit saying that they were going to be bigger than the Beatles. And that's I think, one...
But who should have to? I mean, the album spoke itself.
Right, but then let it do its job. Yes. It's a great album. And honestly, I like a couple of their other albums, like Definitely Maybe's a good album, and then Be Here Now is a good album, but you need to let your work do the talking. The album is phenomenal. They could have been huge. But, once again, we're just sticking with, top 11 here, so I'm sticking with mine at number 6. So what do you got at 6?
10.
Wow. Okay.
No, not the number, like the album.
Yeah.
10.
Yeah.
We didn't backtrack. We didn't rewind. Yeah, 10. I mean, it was a grunge album. I mean, again, this goes back to what is the definition of grunge? And by all means necessary, this was the definition of grunge. However, Pearl Jam didn't make grunge. Pearl Jam kind of hopped on the grunge wagon. I mean, if you think about how this album was done, most of this album originally was just jam tracks. It was guys getting together, jamming in a studio, and then Eddie Vedder wrote the lyrics and added them. I mean, the whole jam thing can be heard when you listen to, I
think it's either Deep or Release, one of the two.
There's that, and then even the beginning of Alive. I mean, the beginning of Alive that's just a jam riff in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But Deep, Release, Alive, I mean, you can hear the foundations of jam. Eddie Vedder just wrote the grunge style lyrics that went over it. And whether or not you know it, this was Pearl Jam's first album. So an epic way to make a splash. It's just you didn't have impact on that genre.
I'm going to disagree slightly because they did have an impact. And I'll talk about that more a little bit later because it's on my list. It's just not there yet. And you'll find out why I put it so high in just a bit. All right, so what do we have at number 5?
To me, and again, this goes to the band not being able to be on there twice, but I think if you take these albums together and make them the one album because they were released on the same date.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Use Your Illusion 1 and 2.
Oh.
Combined together as one album, it is a masterpiece.
I'll give it to you, it's good. I don't think it's a masterpiece.
I think it's a masterpiece. I mean, most of the hits came off of Use Your Illusion 2. But, and people have said, well, Use Your Illusion 1 was all filler material with the exception of 1 or 2 songs. But if you listen front to back from Use Your Illusion 1 to the end of Use Your Illusion 2, epic masterpiece. And let's go over a Guns N' Roses track list here. Up to that point in time, including that album, there were 17 songs that Guns N' Roses was known for. Up to that, the end of that album. 17 songs. We all know Appetite for Destruction produced 8 single hits. And not okay, we're saying this like the cult classics of Sublime. No, 8 hits, legit. Then you had one album that had Patience. Awesome song. Then you have these 2 albums which produced the other 8 songs on that list of 17. You can't fault it, given it's not 8 hits on one disc, but spread out across 2. And you had this album had 3 tracks on it that were over 8 minutes long. And most people would usually lose focus after 3 or 4 minutes. But people loved them. People loved November Rain. People loved Estranged. People loved Civil War.
I think that this album was Axl trying to put together a concept, and he was trying to, I think, you know what? I'm going to go conspiracy theory here. I think he was trying to maybe put something out on Broadway with this. I don't actually think that Axl came in here intending to write masterful and a masterpiece album. I like the songs on here. Don't get me wrong, I like the songs, but in the scope of what else was going on in the 90s at the time, I don't think this made that huge of an impact.
See, I'll disagree.
If they dropped Appetite for Destruction the same time as, say, Pearl Jam and Nirvana and all them and Metallica, when they dropped their album, you know what? It would have made a much bigger impression. And I think, honestly, metal would have been a lot further along had they have released it around the same time. That's my honest opinion.
I think metal would have been even bigger had Axl Rose not been a jackass and, break the band up.
Right. So, I mean, that's where...
But again, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, to me, that it was necessary.
It was, yes, I will give it to you, it was.
It made a splash. It continued rock. It wasn't as in your face as Appetite for Destruction. I'm not going to lie to you. But it kept some metal tracks to it, but it also brought some pop tracks to it. And I'll give you the whole, maybe he's trying to go Broadway here, but I don't think he was trying to go Broadway. I don't think it was the concept. The music videos that followed off of this album, when you look at videos like November Rain and Estranged, the videos were trying to go Broadway, not the music.
Please tell me that you aren't actually serious about that. Because when you look at the videos and what he put in the videos and how much time and money he put in the videos, tell me he didn't want that to get picked up by somebody.
Again, I said the videos. I didn't say the album.
Right, but you know what? You lay out a great concept. Like, and I'm going to go, recent new music now. Like, if you take Stone Sour and the House of Golden Bones, that double album is all a concept based around a comic book. So you have another visual medium to go along with the songs in case you can't follow the songs in the story. So you're telling me that Axl, with, those types of things, didn't say, hey, here's my canvas for what I want my thing to look like. You're not going to tell me that that's not the case.
No.
All right.
Again, I mean, I see where you're coming from. $4 million on one music video is a boatload of money, only topped by Michael Jackson at $7 million. Different story. But $4 million for Estranged, I mean, anybody in the music industry, and people have said it's been on, several shows on VH1 and MTV, that in itself is when people sat there and said, that's not Guns N' Roses. They're not going to be around much more. The videos, yes, I'll give you the videos, but I don't think this album was written intentionally with the purpose to be a movie, Broadway, whatever you want to call it. It's just that time, music videos were the most important thing. And people sat there and said, actually, I shouldn't even say people, the record label said, hey, how can we promote this? Let's have a killer music video. Let's get it on the VMAs and let's jack it up.
To the tune of $4 million. No. When probably whoever won that year, I'm guaranteeing you, spent not even a quarter of the amount of money.
Given that wasn't a video of the year, I don't think it was even nominated, but still. I mean, that you can't sit there and say because you had huge production numbers that that's what it was. It's just the record label saying, hey, I want this huge production video. And I mean, even their performance on the VMAs was also the most expensive performance ever on the VMAs.
Once again, I think this is them trying to push the envelope a little bit. And I think that no matter what we say about this, because we've been going on for this one for a good amount of time, I think no matter how we...
number 5, we should.
Right, no matter how we slice this, though, Axl's a drama queen.
Oh, he is.
Yeah. All right, so...
But from knowing people who know him, I actually hear he is a cool guy.
When you're on his good side. What did he say about Slash again? Slash is a what? A cancer, and it takes 3 guitarists to replace Slash? So my number 5. So you went Korn.
No.
I went Limp Bizkit. Number 5 for me, I went Limp Bizkit's Significant Other. So you talked about how Korn, earlier on, how they did their whole thing and they brought this into the forefront. I agree with you to a certain extent. Limp Bizkit, you're not going to tell me that they didn't have a bigger splash than Korn did. Because every single white boy in the freaking neighborhood had that backwards red Yankee hat on when Nookie hit huge.
I didn't. I had that backwards red Mets hat on.
Okay, same thing. But still, everybody wanted the bubble jacket. Everybody wanted the shell top Adidas. Everybody wanted the backwards red hat. They hit it, and they hit it huge. And you know what? This was the best album that they put out. I liked Chocolate Starfish.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the green one that they did after that.
Yeah.
There. Then they did that one 5-track album. There. And then they did the recent one that they did on
Gold Cobra or whatever.
Yeah, but Gold Cobra, and you actually know where they're signed now?
No.
Death Row Records.
Hey.
But thinking about where they came from with the first album, $3 Bill Y'all. They had
Great album.
It was a great album, but it wasn't like woo over the top. You had Faith, which once again, I hate when album hits are covers. Hate it with a passion because it's not them actually doing it. Yeah, they did it in a different way, and they did it good, but it's not their material. When they finally turned around and said, we're going to embrace our hip hop and we're going to embrace everything that we are, they came out with Significant Other. And it was a great album. All the tracks that they did and the way that they kind of blended everything together with Redman and was it with Method Man too?
Yep.
Yeah, with Redman and Method Man on a couple tracks. Just great. The video concepts, like you were talking about, at that time, videos are huge. The videos that they did were great. You were in the Nookie video.
Yep. And I met Matt Pinfield and Pauly Shore at that video shoot. Wow. Someplace in that sea of people. You'll see me with my backwards red Mets hat.
But that even proves it right there because you had all the guys wanted to be Fred Durst and all the girls wanted to get with Fred Durst at that time. Everybody had, no offense, they had their hands on the Nookie. They wanted Limp Bizkit, and this is why I think that Significant Other was such a huge album, and that's why I put it at number 5.
But again, and this goes back to Follow the Leader. First off, if it wasn't for Korn, if it wasn't for Fred Durst tattooing the guys in Korn, we wouldn't even know who Limp Bizkit was. That's number 1. Let's start there. Number 2, $3 Bill Y'all. Great album. That to me is the essential of what Limp Bizkit is. Then you throw in Nookie, you throw in this album. This album to me is Limp Bizkit selling out. I know you hate when I use that word.
No, I'll give it to you. That it might have been a sellout thing, but you talked about the Chili Peppers earlier, and you talked about how, they were completely immature when they recorded Mother's Milk. They were completely immature when they did $3 Bill Y'all. There was no, like, hey, this is how you do a record. This is, what your focus is. They were all over the place. They had Dino from Fear Factory on the album. Yeah. Then they did, like, Public Enemy's Bring the Noise.
Yeah.
No, was that on?
That was Anthrax.
No. I'm trying to remember if it was Stained who did that or if it was...
That was Anthrax.
No. I know they originally did it, but Stained did it on an album. The one with the clown face, the one with Mud Shovel, but...
Mm-hmm. That was also a great album.
It was either that...
Nowhere on this list, though.
No. It was either that or Limp Bizkit did it. It's hard to remember because there were so many different jam tracks. You're talking about that too. There's so many different jam tracks on that initial album that it's hard to remember what was on it. Mm-hmm. Even though we're having this discussion about what was on that album,
the first 5 songs, like the first group of songs up to Faith, that whole first group, awesome. I mean, come on, every guy can sit there and react to the words "psycho female blowing up them phone lines." Every guy's had the psycho female blowing up the phone lines.
Right. But once again, though, we're talking about big albums in the 90s. It wasn't a big album.
Not at all.
It was their introductory album, and they started to lose me toward the end. Like, when you get towards, like, Faith, okay, there's a whole bunch of filler before Faith, and then, to me, the only other really awesome song in this whole thing is Counterfeit.
See, to me, everything up to Stuck was great.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Then you came... Stuck to me was like the last great song on there. Then you got Faith, which is what made all the girls want Fred Durst, which in turn made Fred Durst do $3, do Significant Other, which, again, without Korn and without Follow the Leader, nobody would know who the fuck Limp Bizkit is.
I disagree, and I know what you're saying, but to be completely honest, I think on its own right, if you put Significant Other up against Follow the Leader, you're going to have probably a split 50-50, and you're on the Korn side, and I'm going to be on the Limp Bizkit side, because I don't think that there's really one bad track on this whole thing.
No, and there's not a bad track on the other, so like you said, it is a 50-50, and I am on the Korn side of it. So, and you're on the Limp Bizkit side, Fair enough. This is why there's 2 of us.
All right, so now we're entering the top 4.
Yep.
All right, so for me, number 4 is the introduction of one of the biggest bands to come around at that time. The Foo Fighters with The Color and the Shape.
Wow. Believe it or not, I know you have that as number 4. I have that as my honorable mention at number 12.
Okay, think about what happened at the time. Okay, you had the passing of Kurt Cobain and the whole nine. Then Dave Grohl, in secret, because he doesn't want anybody to know that he's doing this, and he actually made the first Foo Fighters album not only on his own, but he did it to cope with the grief of the death of Kurt Cobain. So the first album was completely him. And there's, cool hits here, like a couple of hits on there, but nothing really like mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. Then Dave Grohl turns around and he gets an entire band. Not only does he learn to play the guitar, not only is he singing, the hits and just the raw emotion coming off of this album and the different styles of music that are on this album, mind-blowing. Just the way that everything fell into place for Dave Grohl after Nirvana was done, I think is a testament to what this album actually did.
So, again, this just missed my countdown. This came in at number 12. I mean, it was a toss-up between Smash and this. I agree with you. I mean, the album was great. I mean, it introduced us to something new. It was post-Nirvana. That's the genre I'd put
and
it
I
in.
will say
Post-Nirvana.
I will say it. This album is the first true album post-grunge, and only maybe 3 years after that can you say anything is post-grunge. Like any band nowadays to say that they're post-grunge, we're talking 15 years later. No.
And this is I agree with you. This is the only band post-grunge that wasn't during the grunge movement. And there is no other band that could say that. However, great songs on here. And, with all the utmost respect to the passing of Kurt Cobain, I mean, love the guy. But I think that this wasn't as impactful in the 90s. I think it was more impactful as for the career of Dave Grohl. I mean, here's the thing. People thought that with the death of Kurt Cobain, that rock music was just dying out anyway. Like, that was the last nail in the coffin. Dave Grohl records this in secret. He does it to cope with the death of Kurt Cobain. I mean, who knows if the album would have been a success or not? Obviously, it was a success. But it made us sit up. We all knew that Dave Grohl could sing. We all knew he was musically talented because he learned to drum on plates and pots and stuff, and then he became a drummer of Nirvana. But to me, this sat there, and it was more legitimate for his career and bringing forward all this impact on music today than it was an impact on 90s rock.
That's why I'm saying it's a great album, because when you turn around and you look at it, not only this is kind of like the argument that if we were going to go over great 70s albums, that you wouldn't put like Van Halen on there, like Van Halen 1. You have to include it because it's a great album at the time, and it's a great album all the way through, and throughout history, like you have tons of guitarists that base their careers on Eddie Van Halen. Now you turn around and you look at somebody who has had so much of an impact, not only on rock, but the culture and, the way that he does things and just the things that he says. I mean, it all stemmed from this album hitting, once again, very, very big. See, that's why I think it goes up there.
And I disagree. I mean, it didn't stem from this album hitting. It stemmed from him being in Nirvana.
If it wasn't a hit, it wouldn't have launched him the way that it did.
No. But if it wasn't a hit, we wouldn't be talking about it. This wouldn't even be on the list.
If it wasn't a hit and Dave Grohl was just another flash in the pan like every other band today, Nickelback. But
Nickelback is legit. You can't sit there and you know what?
All right. But number 4, definitely, in my opinion, goes to the Foo Fighters and The Color and the Shape.
Number 4 for me goes to, and it was an album that, again, got mentioned earlier, not by you, but in description of my number 11, Dookie. Dookie to me is number 4. And when I get to my top 3, you'll know why.
Okay.
But Dookie was huge. I think it's one of the only albums on this list to be certified diamond. I mean, that says a lot about you to be certified diamond.
It pretty much is the only album on either one of our lists that is diamond. I will say that. The only reason why I think it's diamond is because a lot of the kids nowadays today, they can still relate back to that album for the same reasons that I can say that we relate back to the Foo Fighters.
You see, and again, everybody can... and that's why, to me, it's on this list, because you can relate back to it. However, it wasn't... this isn't the album that made them what they are today.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I will completely disagree with you.
Okay, hang on. Let me rephrase this. It's not what people know them for today.
That is true. It got them where they are today, but they are not the same band that they were. As soon as American Idiot came out, Dookie and anything prior was forgotten.
And as soon as Nimrod came out, everybody who was huge Green Day fans said, nah. Myself, I love Nimrod. But either way, Dookie belongs on this album.
Yeah.
Or on this list. I mean, front to back, it's 48 minutes, I believe.
And see, while you have this all the way up here, I would have put this at my number 12 at an honorable mention.
No.
It's a great album, and it launched Green Day. But The Offspring, I think, where I put them at number 11, they brought punk to the forefront. Green Day kind of dropped what they did, and they retooled their sound a little bit to make themselves popular, and The Offspring stayed who they were. That's why I kind of reversed those two.
But again, without Dookie, I don't think Smash would have been that popular. I mean, the two of them toured together so many times, so frequently, and they literally played off of each other. If I asked you, if I sat there and said to you, here's The Offspring, name 5 bands that you would relate to The Offspring. First one that come to mind, Green Day. If I sat there and said to you, here's Green Day, name 5 bands that come to your mind right away, Offspring would come there. They're there with each other. And without Dookie, Offspring wouldn't have been huge. And I think the whole, new wave of punk music wouldn't have taken off without that album. Because obviously there was Kerplunk before it. There was
1039 smoothed out slappy hours. That's what I was thinking of.
So you had 2 albums prior. Obviously neither album made an impact. Dookie made the impact. So it's obvious that without this album, I don't think this new wave of punk music wouldn't have been there. It led way for The Offspring. It laid way for bands like Blink-182. Again, this is a staple. You think 90s, everybody knows what the cover of that album looks like.
Honestly, I don't know. You know what? I like Green Day, and I like what they did. For some reason, it just sits better. The Offspring, just the power behind it.
Tell me you don't know all the words to Welcome to Paradise.
Yeah, I do. I never said that I didn't. But The Offspring and the way that they did their album, and they kept their sound. They did not change to become popular. That's why I put them at 11 instead of Green Day.
Well, hey, we're allowed to disagree.
Right.
You're going to disagree with me on my number 3.
Yep. So speaking of number 3, go ahead.
Metallica's The Black Album.
Okay.
I know you're going to have it higher up there. I know you're going to have it probably in your top 2. But The Black Album, I mean, this is what brought metal to the foreground. I mean, before this, metal was in the 80s and it was starting to die out. And you could sit there and say Appetite for Destruction was metal coming out to the 90s. No. Appetite for Destruction was its own beast.
That's just heavy rock at its best.
Exactly. This was metal. It wasn't the most metal album Metallica did, but this made metal popular. This made people sit up and say, hey, there's Metallica. What's that band Megadeth? What's that band Anthrax? What's that band Iron Maiden? I mean, all the kids in the 90s who never heard of these bands because they probably wouldn't have gone back to 80s music, all of a sudden looked up and took listen. Given Megadeth put out an album the week before.
Nobody cared.
No, not true. It debuted at number 1.
Really?
Yes, it did. Debuted at number 1. Then Metallica drops this, and it was, once again, Lars Ulrich saying, fuck you to Dave Mustaine. I mean, that's... But again, this... If it wasn't for this, then we'd be having this conversation about Megadeth, not Metallica.
Yeah. No, I agree. And Megadeth definitely... You know, Dave Mustaine and the way that he just did things early on in the band is like... It's even hard to talk about it because he was such a douche. Like, anything that he did... And the reason why Megadeth gets such a bad rap is because he was such a douche about everything up until recently. And he's actually not that bad of a guy, but...
No, he's actually pretty cool. I didn't get to actually meet him. I was hanging out on tour bus with a band, and it was at Gigantor. And he's the type of guy who literally came over to the tour bus, knocked on the door. Hey, you guys doing okay? You guys need anything? Cool. If you do, my bus is over there. He treats all bands with the utmost respect, and he's a great guy. And I'm not saying anything bad about Dave Mustaine. As a matter of fact, probably one of the coolest guys out there, But like you said, at that time he was a douche, and the only reason he was a douche is because he didn't have his mind focused on music. He had his mind focused on one thing, and that was beating Metallica.
And unfortunately, he couldn't.
He did. For 1 week.
Yep.
For 1 week.
Before they put out the album.
and again, Metallica just said, hey, guess what? Fuck you.
Yep.
So, again, like I said, if it wasn't for the Black Album, we wouldn't be having this, we wouldn't have this conversation. We'd be talking about Megadeth.
All right. So that's your number 3. My number 3 is Pearl Jam's 10. Okay. So, I'm not the biggest Pearl Jam fan, and I'll admit it.
I'm a huge Pearl Jam fan.
Okay. So, for me, to be able to listen to this Pearl Jam album, start to finish, no breaks, no pauses, nothing. Incredible album all the way through. And even when they re-released it a couple of years ago and they put up those unreleased tracks, they were still really, really good, and they were left off the album.
Yeah.
In addition to that, on, I think it's Release or Deep, it's one of the last couple tracks, they actually said that they wanted to do, and I talked about it earlier with another band, that they wanted to do that whole album thing from back in the 70s. They actually hid tracks inside of the album. It was like Slave Master, and it was in one of those songs at like the 5-minute mark. Mm-hmm. But it's really, really good all the way through, and what most people don't know is that was an album released before Nevermind.
Yeah.
And Nevermind, when that hit, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but Nevermind, when that hit, Pearl Jam actually rode the tails of that to their own popularity. Because, once again, when we talked earlier about, when I talked about Bush, everybody was more refined than Pearl Jam. More refined than Nirvana. But Pearl Jam was on that borderline alternative grunge. It wasn't, in your face. They had more depth, more meaning to it. And anything that they did on 10 made it, in my opinion, one of the top 3 just because of how epic that album is all the way through. For a first album, every single song is a hit, could have been a hit. It speaks volumes about you guys as musicians, and they didn't even know Eddie Vedder when they wrote the album. He actually just auditioned for the band. They heard him. He sent them a tape from like San Diego.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think to me, it made way more of an impact than where you had it on your list.
I mean, but again, it's when you think impact, it's like you said, great album, great first album for a band, awesome, hands down. If we were talking about albums that were the most impactful first album, number 1. But like you also said, it rode the coattails of Nevermind.
But it was put.
If it wasn't for, here's the thing, we all know Nevermind was not Nirvana's first album. So again, we had 2 albums, then we had Nevermind, which broke out huge. And even though this was released before Nevermind, the music industry didn't take listen of it till, wait a second, there's this band from Nirvana, band from Seattle called Nirvana. They're huge. Wait, there's also this band from Seattle called Pearl Jam. Hey, let's listen to 10. 10, huge. Great, let's throw it out there. Year prior, nobody really put that much credit into it. As a matter of fact, I can almost guarantee that if it wasn't for songs like Evolution, Do the Evolution, a lot of people wouldn't have even turned back to look at Pearl Jam.
I agree to disagree on that one. I really think that the album stood in its own right before Nirvana came along, and it did what it had to do. It got the band out there, and then they came around with their second album, and when the second album came out, grunge was huge. And then once again, because of the refinement of Pearl Jam as opposed to Nirvana, it made it more accessible to more people.
I mean, and again, I love 10. 10 to me, front to back, was great. And Vitology to me is something I would consider good album. It's not as great as 10, but Vitology still shows. Vitology to me is that Lost album. That's that album where you couldn't sit there and, without going to your computer, you couldn't sit there and name a hit to me.
Corduroy.
He proves me wrong, people.
Corduroy is actually one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs.
But 10, I mean, but without songs like Do the Evolution, if it wasn't, you got to realize people were 30. If I was 35 instead of 30, I would be like totally disagreeing with everything I said, because I would have been there when 10 came out, when this whole grunge thing was taking off. I would have been there from the start. I'm 30. Got to realize, this came out hindsight. I didn't pick this up till like 95-ish, 94, 95. That's when I started to get into all this music. But again, without something else in the future, you wouldn't have even looked back at 10. And I think without Nevermind, you wouldn't have even looked back at 10. You said it yourself.
I know, but hold on. I agree to disagree once again. I agree with all the points that you're making, but then if you look at what popular rock radio plays, they will play Jeremy. They'll play all of the bigger songs, because they're all big songs on the album. They will play those songs, and they will be, they're hits. So you like the song, you're going to find the album. You will find a way to find the album. It's always going to be like that. So to say that you wouldn't have ever found it, I find that very hard, especially in this market here where we are, because once again, there's only like 2 rock stations readily available, and one plays, older rock, and then the other one kind of mixes it up a bit. But if you heard Pearl Jam anywhere in the United States, you would go to find that album. If you like the way that Jeremy sounded, or any of the other songs on there, like Once, Even Flow, Alive, Why Go, Black, they're all really good songs, and any radio station would play these. So you would go find it.
Why Go is one of my favorite songs on this album, by the way. I just got so tired of hearing Even Flow. It's so overplayed.
But still, if you liked Even Flow, you would find a way to find the album. The reason why...
that was the first Pearl Jam song I ever heard, was Even Flow. I'm not denying
exactly.
But...
And you went and found the album.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get back on track. Number 2.
Another double disc for me.
Go on.
Melancholy and Infinite Sadness.
I knew you were going to put this on your list.
Damn right. Again, this to me, front to back, phenomenal. And nowadays, with all the whole thing with iTunes and everything like that, and the fact that you can arrange playlists, it's even better if you sit there and you dissect it into its own group. If you take track 1 from disc 1, followed up with track 1 from disc 2, track 2 to track 2, track 3 to track 3, back and forth, the album just comes out even beyond volumes totally different. It makes it better. And that's the thing. I mean, given where there are a lot of hits off of it, I think 4, 5.
About that, yeah.
But, I mean, look at, again, this is one of those things where you can't put Smashing Pumpkins in the same, you could say they're grunge, but they're not. They're something different.
They're that alternative mix.
And you can sit, there's so many genres you can incorporate in. And to me, this album not only made the hits with the alternative stuff, it kind of fell into that little bit of grunge movement. But at the same time, there was something beyond that, like something that just spoke straight up talent. I mean, Billy Corgan, the way that he handled certain tracks was incredible. Jimmy Chamberlain on the drums, I mean, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, I mean, an alternative drum sound like that, you wouldn't think it possible. To me, this album is just iconic. And if you look up, what it did charts-wise, again, the only thing that bought this album, the only thing that ruined this album, the only thing that ruined the Smashing Pumpkins was, in my opinion, Jimmy Chamberlain going to prison. Again, we're not here to talk about that, but that killed any momentum for the Smashing Pumpkins. You had a great first album with Siamese Dream, and that wasn't even their first album.
Then why are you saying it's their first album?
I don't know. Because the other ones just were completely indie. It was like their first major record label album.
Okay, there you go. That's a little bit better.
The others were indie, and unless you were a big fan of the band, you wouldn't even know they existed.
You're right. I'm not a huge fan of the Smashing Pumpkins. I like their stuff. I'm not gonna lie, but to me, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness is just exactly what it is. It's melancholy and infinite sadness, because I'm looking for a trub rock type thing, and I'm looking
wasn't even a popular single.
Right. I'm looking for something like bigger from the Pumpkins than what they did on that. Like, you put it in and you listen to it. Yeah, you get a couple things. You get Zero, but then you turn around and you get like 1979 and you get Tonight and things like that. Yeah, they're hits in their own right, but for me to go on this list and for a double disc, like you talked Guns N' Roses earlier, how many hits came off of that?
8.
How many came off of this? 4.
But again,
and were they big? They weren't big.
Yeah, they were.
How? No, Zero wasn't as big as.
No, Zero wasn't, but Bullet with Butterfly Wings was.
Right.
1979
okay.
was. Tonight.
3 of their biggest songs came off of these albums, and what's the rest of it? Like, it's all fluff and filler. Like, what's the one song in there? Mayonnaise. Fluff and filler. Cupid de Lock? I can't stand that song. It's all fluff.
There's fluff and filler, but again, you have to dissect it for what the band did. Again, it wasn't Siamese Dream where everything had a consistent sound and it all fell into the same spectrum. This was something where we kind of experimented sound. Like you mentioned before with Guns N' Roses. When I mentioned Guns N' Roses, you're like, well, this was like a concept to me. This was a concept for the Smashing Pumpkins. It just never got looked at as a concept. I never associated it as a concept until all of a sudden I sat there and said, hey, track 1 with track 1, track 2 with track 2, track 3 with track 3, track 4, and going down the list, all of a sudden you realize that's a pretty good fucking concept. But I wouldn't have known that until today.
To me, like I said, I'm not a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan. You're a big Pumpkins fan, so...
Was.
But,
Sorry.
what's the matter? You don't like their new stuff? Don't like the concept that he just did?
What concept?
Oh, you have no... Oh, big Pumpkin...
No. Let's get this. Let's get this straight here. I know the stuff he did. I know the concept he did. I don't know if I'd consider it a concept because it's like that Bush album that you were talking about where you just don't want to listen.
Yeah. I mean, granted, and we're getting a little bit off kilter here, but there were a couple of things that he did right but he did a lot of things really wrong.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why nobody's heard of Tear Garden by Kaleidoscope except for like people who are really looking for it. So, be that as it may.
And it's one of those things where you get one original member left in the band who tries to ride the name of the band all the way through.
Well, he tried the new band name thing, and that didn't work out, so how did it?
Nope.
Zwan. Really? All right, so my number 2, and this is no shock to you, the Black Album. We talked about it earlier. It's huge. It's Metallica. It brought Metallica from just being that metal thrash underground band of Injustice for All and Master of Puppets, and it brought them to the forefront. It brought them to another level. Everybody and their mother knew who Metallica was. People waited outside of record stores to get that album, and that's it. There's nothing else to be said about it. It was just the right album, the right time, the right producer, and the band with the right attitude, and they weren't afraid to take a chance on a ballad.
No. And again, that whole waiting out in front of the record store thing, I mean, that was total classic 90s. And again, going back to my number 5 with Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, people waited outside the record store, and believe it or not, that is the biggest selling first day album ever.
What one? Use Your Illusion?
Yep.
Because it was a double disc, of course. They had to pay twice.
Use Your Illusion 2, the biggest. Look it up. Use Your Illusions 2 was the biggest single day, like, opening day release.
I gotta look that up, but for some reason I have a really hard time believing that people would buy the second disc more than the first disc. If they dropped on the same day and you had to buy them separately, why would one be more than the other?
Because the first single was on disc 2.
I still don't see it, because if you get 2, you're gonna get 1. If somebody did that nowadays, you would buy both discs at the same time. But bands are smarter nowadays. They release them separately.
But again, we go back to concepts, and that again, it wasn't to be this big epic Broadway thing, but it was a concept. Hey, let's put out 2 albums, same day, same name, 1 and 2, and see what happens. Oh yeah, by the way, the first single's on the second one. The song that everybody wants to hear was on the second one.
Well, I don't know how we got off of Metallica and went back to Guns N' Roses. But...
because we were talking about when people waited out in front of the store, and everybody did it for the fucking Black Album.
Yeah, everybody did. Like, people bought the cassette tapes, and then they bought the CDs, and just epic, beyond epic for a metal album at that time.
And that was the first rock album I ever listened to front to back, and that was at the tender age of 7.
All right. So now, number 2.
That was number 2.
Yeah, I know. We finished with number 2.
And number 1. We could actually say this in stereo,
yeah. No, we both know what it is. Everybody knows what it is. We've been hinting around it the entire countdown, because you can't talk about the 90s without talking about this.
Yeah.
Nirvana's Nevermind.
Yeah.
That's it. You want to talk 90s, you want to define 90s, you look at the album, that's the 90s right there. I mean, now granted, we talked about a lot of other albums on this list. Like Pearl Jam's 10 has more hit songs than Nevermind. I will say it. It did. Like, if you think about some songs that are on this, a lot of the albums are more accessible than Nevermind.
Mm-hmm.
The hits that came off of Nevermind are some of the biggest hits of all time. You could put them up there with the way the Beatles had their hits back in the 60s.
Yeah.
But if you look at songs like Territorial Pissing, who wants to, like, honestly, no radio station would ever touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Well, just for the name.
Just for the name. I mean, nobody would touch that.
But it's a great song.
It's a great song once you get into it. And, if you're like some people that I knew growing up, they buy the albums just for the hits. And I know that you've done a couple of those yourself. You bought them just for the hits and you listen to them, and that's it.
They were flop albums.
Right. But I mean, like, you look at, like, anything pretty much from 7 until about track 10. And you're getting Territorial Pissing, Drain You, Lounge Act, and Stay Away. Who knows those songs?
Drain You to me was an awesome song, and I'll give you Lounge Act and Stay Away. I mean, Stay Away was one of those ones that if you got the album, you were into the album, you would like that song. Drain You, I'm actually kind of disappointed. It didn't become too big of a hit.
No, not at all. And honestly, you look at the first 5-6 tracks on this thing. You look at Smells Like Teen Spirit, then In Bloom, Come As You Are, Breed, Lithium, Polly. I mean, it wasn't a huge hit, but it's a great song if you listen to it. And then
what made Polly, though, I think, was the unplugged version of that song.
I'll give you that. It was a good unplugged version. Then you look at the last couple track, or the last track, but then there's also a hidden track. The last track, On a Plane. Mm-hmm. Great song.
Oh, yeah.
But then what really made Nevermind for me, and I didn't know this until years later, the hidden track that's on the album, Something in the Way. Do you ever hear it?
Oh, yeah. It's also on the unplugged.
Right. But what most people don't know about it is that when they actually recorded the album, the band was in the studio. And Kurt Cobain, when he was recording it, actually was laying on his back on a couch playing guitar because Butch Vig, when he was doing the album, he actually liked the way that Kurt's voice sounded when he was on his back. So when he was just humming the lyrics in the studio, it just didn't feel right. So he went out of the studio, they were taking a break, and he was singing the lyrics, just laying down, and it captured the mood. And I think if more people would have heard that song back in the early part of the 90s, it would have even more amplified the album than it did. But once again, a lot of people were doing that album thing where they were going to hide stuff here and there, and I think that's really cool. And this is one of the things that actually came out of it that was incredible.
No, yeah. And again, I mean, many people don't realize it because it is that hidden track. And in all honesty, though, if it, again, may he rest in peace, Kurt Cobain, may he rest in peace, but I think if it wasn't for his, suicide, or I actually think he was murdered, if it wasn't for whatever you want to call it, if it wasn't for his death, I don't think people would have stood up and looked at Something in the Way. Honestly, and again, you're going to disagree with me here. It's going to be one of those I agree to disagree moments. A lot of the more depressing Nirvana songs, you wouldn't have looked at, you wouldn't have even considered if it wasn't for the fact that the guy died.
Not true. I like what they do on some of their depressing songs and some of the downtrodden things. When you listen to them now and you know what happened, you take it a whole different way.
But again, at the time, if you got that album, you wouldn't have gone out of your way to hear Something in the Way.
No, not true at all.
But after the guy dies, it's, again, it's an apparent suicide, and people are still going with it's a suicide, so... But if it wasn't for his death, you wouldn't have sat there and said, gee, I wonder if this maybe reveals something. Or you wouldn't have even looked deeper into the meaning of some of his songs.
That's the way that you look back at it, though. At the time, listening to the whole thing, I just think it's another great song. And with the way that he does, like, Polly, and the way that he does, other songs, not necessarily on this album, but he does those downtrodden, kind of dark and moody songs. It's just another one of those, and it's a really good song. I'm going to use this example, too, because he died a little bit ago, Peter Steele. One of the songs on Typo Negative's album, what the hell was the name of that album?
I don't know. You played the song for me once, and it's eerie as hell.
Life is Killing Me is the album. And if you listen to the one song on here, I Don't Want to Be Me, he actually predicted how he would die on that song. Now, did I listen to it beforehand? Yes. Did I like it? Yes. Now when you turn around and you look back at it, it's like, holy shit, look at what I just found. It's a great song, but the great songs that become greater, or they become greater when they have a whole another meaning to it. And I don't think Kurt, when he wrote some of these songs, he was planning on committing suicide. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Who knows? But I mean, that's neither here nor there. We're talking in circles about how
But apparently, many people, according to if you read up on it, apparently there were several suicide threats prior to this album. And again, we'll go conspiracy theory another time. But there were several attempts prior to this. So it wasn't like something that came as a shock. It did when it happened, but it didn't come as much of a shock. I think what it is that what made it the shock that it was is that this is Nirvana is a band that motivated so many people to be unmotivated.
I think differently. I think Nirvana motivated people to kind of, especially with Smells Like Teen Spirit, to rise up.
Well, no, I'm just saying that as a joke because when I say unmotivated, grunge, unmotivated. I mean, it was that anthem to like stand up and rise up against the man.
And it was definitely, something that was needed at that time, when you had all like the hair metal and things like that going on, where it was just, party and this and that and the other thing. No. And it was just, a good time. And
this made chilling in your basement a good time.
This made the uncool cool. That's what it was. Exactly. Guys in flannel coming out smashing on guitars and having like these big brutal hits where everything is just as loud as it goes. That's grunge.
And that's it. It was raw. And again, when I say it inspired a generation, it did. And when I say it to be unmotivated, it's just because I'm playing a pun on what grunge was. Grunge was music that was depressing, unmotivating, all that stuff. But reality was, it was a statement. And many people don't dissect it for the statement that it was. It was raw. It was raw and it became popular. It was popular to be raw.
No, I do agree.
And that's the thing, and Kurt Cobain was just that motivating force. If you were to try to put anybody else in that picture, it wouldn't have succeeded.
No, not at all. I completely agree with that.
You couldn't put Eddie Vedder there. People would have been like, no.
No, even Pearl Jam, I mean, like we talked about earlier with 10 was out before Nevermind.
Yeah.
And while 10 is a great album, Nevermind just blows that out of the water. I mean, like if you look at, I put Metallica at number 2 on this list and Nirvana's number 1.
Yeah.
I love Metallica. They're my favorite band. Did they blow up the 90s? No. Nirvana blew up the 90s. Nirvana was that not metal band. And they couldn't fit in metal because it wasn't metal. They couldn't fit in punk because it wasn't punk. It was just something new and different. And that's what made the 90s what they were.
No, definitely. And, you look at... And again, this is kind of something else I was going at, too, is what I said. You look at Kurt Cobain, and Kurt Cobain is the image of grunge. I mean, if you think of, like you said, guy in a flannel shirt, going out, smashing on things, loud... First thing that comes to your mind, even if I didn't mention Nirvana, first person that comes to your mind is probably going to be
Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, nobody else carries that image. And if you look at any picture of Nirvana,
all right, so we have pretty much rounded out. Actually, we have rounded out our lists, and just as a quick recap, myself, number 11, The Offspring, Smash. 10, Far Beyond Driven, Pantera. Number 9, Sublime, their self-titled album. Number 8, Bush's 16 Stone. Number 7, Santana, Supernatural. Number 6, Oasis, What's the Story, Morning Glory. Number 5, Limp Bizkit, Significant Other. Number 4, The Foo Fighters, The Color and the Shape. Number 3, Pearl Jam's 10. Number 2, The Black Album from Metallica. And number 1, Nirvana's Nevermind. Poke, what do you got?
All right, so I'm going to start with the honorable mention because you mentioned yours in there too. My honorable mention was The Color and Shape. But number 11, Smash. The only one on here that... Actually, one of two that we actually agreed on. We both agreed on Smash being number 11. We eventually agreed on number 1. So number 11, Smash. Number 10, Sublime. Number 9, The Downward Spiral. Number 8, Follow the Leader. Number 7, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Number 6, 10. Number 5, Use Your Illusions as a combination, 1 and 2. Dookie, number 4. 3 was the Black Album. 2, Melancholy and Infinite Sadness. And number 1, the other one that we agree on,
never mind.
There you go.
All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. And
do we have a way to get feedback?
Yeah, actually, we do. And I was just going to get into that.
Beautiful.
So thank you.
Bueno.
What we're going to be doing is we're setting up an email address, and we would like to actually hear from you guys. We want to know your opinions, your thoughts, and things like that. Always, we're going to be taking, requests on different top 10 or top 11s, excuse me.
Yeah, throw that in there.
Yes, top 11s we're going to be doing. So we're going to be coming back in about another week or so. We're going to be doing another top 11 on the... What do we agree on?
We didn't agree on anything. we have a list, but we never agreed on one.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to put it out there. The next list that we're going to do, we're going to be doing the top rock guitarists of all time. Because another what's it called? A lot of lists that I've seen, including like from Rolling Stone, they have a lot of lists, and every year it kind of it changes, and I don't necessarily agree with what they say. So, and I know...
I don't think I ever agree with Rolling Stone.
No, and so we're going to come back next week, and we're going to be doing the top 11 rock/metal guitarists of all time. But once again, if you guys have any...
And just mind you real fast, these are individual guitarists. One that I proposed to you was that we do the top 11 guitar duos, where you have like bands like Metallica who, again, you have the two guitarists who play off each other really well. Doesn't mean that we can't exclude, I can sit there and say Kirk Hammett on my list.
Right. But we're going to come back and we're going to do top 11 rock/metal guitarists of all time. So if you guys have any, feedback, questions, comments,
answers,
anything, whatever it may be, hey, you suck, hey, you guys are awesome, give us a list to do, we'll look it up, we'll do some research and things like that.
Better yet, give us your 11.
Yeah, give us your 11. We want to know what you guys think as well. I mean, this podcast is as much yours as it is ours. We're just the ones talking. So, let us know, and we'll be back again. Oh, and it might help if I give you the email address. It's theygo to11@yahoo.com. Spell out the word 11. So it's theygo to11@yahoo.com. So until next time, turn it up to 11. Talk to you then.